Hey tubers, it's Tony, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator on a 2002 Chevy Trailblazer. This is the 4.3 liter motor. Before you get started, one of my recommendations to you is to remove the entire battery out of the way. It'll give you a little bit more room to work on the alternator and to pull the alternator out. Plus, the battery tray makes for an excellent work table. The reason why we're replacing the alternator today is because it failed and is no longer charging the vehicle's battery. One of the first things you should always do before working on an alternator or anything electrical in your vehicle is you should disconnect the black cable from your battery. In this case, if you're going to remove the whole battery, disconnect the black cable, then disconnect the red cable. When you go to put the battery back in, connect the red cable first, then the black cable. The next thing you'll need to do is remove the drive belt on this vehicle. And what you're going to notice I did was I took a ratchet, a socket, and a long driver, and I'm going to use that for leverage, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. This particular vehicle has a belt tensioner pulley, and on that tensioner pulley there's a groove made for your 3/8 ratchet to fit into. So let me set that up so you'll see what that looks like. Okay guys, you'll notice that the 3/8 ratchet fits into the groove of the belt tensioner, so I hope you can see that. And then what I simply do is I pull it to the driver's side, and if you'll notice that when I do that, notice the belt, it's taking the tension off the belt, and then you can easily slip the belt off. So let me do that right quick. Okay, now that I've removed the drive belt, guys, and FYI, if this is your first time removing a drive belt on any vehicle, you may want to snap a picture of what that looks like so that you can make sure that you can correctly route the belt back onto the pulleys when you're done. The next thing you'll need to do is remove this brace right here, or bracket rather. There's a 10mm bolt there, and there are two 15mm bolts there that you need to remove. Let's do that. Okay guys, now you can take that bracket and set it to the side. Again, keep in mind, if you're not familiar with what you're doing here, you always want to snap pictures so that you know how things go back. So if you're missing something, you have an extra part in your hand, you have a photograph to reflect back on that will show you where it goes. The next thing you want to do to get the alternator out is there are two 15mm bolts here, one there, one there. And on the very bottom of the alternator, there's another 15mm bolt. You will simply have to get a short driver and a 3/8 ratchet and go down there and feel your way onto that bolt and break it free. Once you break those 3 bolts loose, the alternator will shift towards you a little bit. Then you can disconnect the electrical connector. It is one of those little tabs that you just pull the connector tab up and slide the electrical connector away from the alternator. And then you want to take a 10mm wrench and loosen up the battery lead bolt. That's the line that leads to your battery. So let's do that. FYI guys, for that bottom bolt, you want to get yourself a 15mm socket, a short driver, and your ratchet. And you want to loosen these 2 top bolts first, but don't take them out. Then what you want to do is, when you start to get that bottom bolt out, after you loosen these 2 bolts, you can then raise up on the alternator a little bit, and it'll take the stress off of that bolt, and then you should be able to remove that bolt with no problem. Okay guys, now that I have the alternator bolts broken, you simply want to take a 10mm wrench to break the battery lead 10mm nut back there. The electrical connector for the alternator, you simply grab this tab here, pull it up, and you can pull the electrical connector away from the alternator. Once you break that bolt back there, disconnect the electrical connector. Take your time guys, you just have to wiggle the alternator through this area to get it out. I don't have 3 hands, so I'll need both hands to do that, so I'll be right back. Okay guys, I have the old alternator out. There it is right there. I don't have the new alternator yet because I'm waiting for the parts guy to bring it to me. But in your case guys, everything that you did to take this stuff apart goes back together in the reverse order. When you get your new alternator, take your time, squeeze it through this area. What you want to do is start your two 15mm bolts here, but don't make them tight. Then what you want to do is go down and put your bottom 15mm bolt in, and then what you want to do is grab the alternator and sort of pull the alternator up for support so that it's not putting stress on that bottom bolt, and you should be able to thread that bottom bolt in. Then once you get all of your bolts started, you can go ahead and tighten them up. But before you actually put the alternator back in with its bolts, you want to make sure that you put the battery lead bolt back on first and reconnect your battery's electrical connector first. Then you can go ahead and put your two bolts here and your one bolt down there and then tighten those up. Okay guys, I put almost everything back together just to show you how this was done. I have the belt back on. You want to do a dummy check in the end to make sure that the belt is sitting on the pulleys correctly before you start this vehicle. Remember, there's the belt tensioner, that shiny piece down there. You put your 3/8 ratchet in it and you crank it to the driver's side. It relieves the stress off of the belt, and then you can slip the belt back on the pulleys. I also wanted you to see what I did here. To get the bolt back up there in that corner end, I took a 15mm short socket, a swivel, 3/8 swivel, and a long driver, and that allowed me to be able to turn that in with no problem. Remember that bottom bolt, you just have to bear with it and take your time to get that bottom bolt back in. For the most part, I reconnected the battery lead and reconnected the alternator electrical connector before I actually put these bolts in, because otherwise you won't be able to do anything with them. You'll notice that the alternator connector is hanging there. The reason it's hanging there is because when the new alternator comes, I have to take this back out to install it. I just put it back in to show you how this is done. So I'm going to go ahead and put the brace back on, and then we're done for the most part. Okay guys, I have the belt back on correctly. I have my 10mm bracket bolt back in, my two 15mm bracket bolts, and don't worry, I don't have them tight because I have to take this stuff back off again. Make sure you have the battery lead hooked up and the electrical connector hooked up before you put the new alternator back in. The only thing left to do is to reconnect your battery. Once you put your battery in, connect the red cable first, then the black cable, and then you're done for the most part. I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.